Chapter 26, in which Princess Kitty returns home. Out on deck, high in the crow's nest, Larry and Giff took the position as lookouts for tonight. Larry blew on his hands and adjusted his knit hat. A cold breeze cuts right through him, while squinting in the wind and peering into the fog ahead. There's a silhouette of something dark looming up. A huge shape. 2 white lights penetrate the bank as it moves closer to him. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," he said. "We're saved!" "What do you say?" Isaac called up. "There's a ship ahead!" Larry cried. Isaac looks through his binoculars and spots it. He starts blowing his whistle. "It's coming this way, Fred," Hector said up at the wheelhouse. Fred heads out on deck and held his breath. A ship is coming towards us. He shouted to Kozlov, "Fire a flare! Make that ship see us!" Kozlov immediately fires a flare through the sky. "I think it'll see us, comrade." However, Giff's eyes widen as he saw what it is. He waved at Fred, shouting, "Wait a minute! Wait a minute!" "What is it, Giff?" Fred piped up. "I don't think it's a rescue ship. And I don't even think it came from Moimo." "What are you talking about?" At the same moment, Larry realized with a shock that the fog bank became thinner and thinner until he spots a shape clearly. Soon, everyone on deck finally got a closer look at what's coming to them. They realized that they were not seeing a rescue ship at all. It was an enormous bird with white wings, a long, elegant neck curved into the shape of an S, an orange bill with a black base. Slowly, it glided across the water towards the Maybelle, getting closer and closer, until finally, the crew were stunned and shocked by the size of it. It was about 25 meters in height, taller than the ship itself. "Jesus, Mary!" Fred screamed. "Would you look at the size of that swan?" "That's impossible," Isaac stated. "Swans belong in the lake or in the river." "Forget that!" Larry cried. "I don't think anyone saw a swan this ginormous before until tonight. If I recall from an encyclopedia I've read, the largest species of swan on record is the Cygnus boconata, or trumpeter swan. The largest waterfowl, mind you. They're only 5 feet in length, with a wingspan of 3 meters. Then I don't really want to know the wingspan of a 7-story swan," Fred said. "I think they're large and strong enough to sink ships like they're toys in a tub." "Well, what's it doing here?" Larry asked. Fred calls out, "Kitty, come out here!" When she is immediately summoned, he asked, "Can you believe that? I guess seeing one supernatural creature, like the stormfish, isn't enough."
"I know," she stated. "She's going to get your ship back home. It seemed the sea had promised rescue for you and your men. This is what you shall get."
"She?" The swan lowers her head, stretching out her neck towards the front of the stranded ship. Walking across the swan's neck and onto the deck was a thin, hollow-cheeked, distinguished-looking man in an old-fashioned blue frock coat with gold buttons and epaulets, matching trousers, and black shoes. If Princess Kitty recalled, she did see that man before. Seeing the man, Fred muttered to himself, "So there must be another human after all." He heads down on deck and greets him. "Ahoy! This is Fred S. Groden of the fishing trawler Maybelle. 3 days ago, we were smashed by a storm and lost all communication from here to Moimo Harbor. Will you help us get home?" The man said nothing. "Can't you talk?" Fred asked. "Maybe he's mute or something," Irving said. "I know," Larry said. "Try using sign language on Fred. Maybe he'll understand better." "Are you suggesting that he's also deaf?" Fred asked. At this moment, the man blows his small whistle, and 2 black swans, as tall as a human, lands in front of Fred and the crew. "More swans of unusual size?" Larry asked. "We speak for the master of the swans," the first one said. "For he is unable to speak," the second said. "We have heard your cries for help, and the Master of the Swans shall accept your request." "That's brilliant," Fred said. "We can't wait to get home." "But shouldn't you send a different ship?" Larry stepped in. "It's embarrassing to be towed home by a giant waterfowl. We already got slumped with giant fish. Don't you think that's enough nonsense for this trip?" "This is the only help you'll ever find," the first one said. "If you dare refuse, the Master of the Swans will leave you, except the Princess Kitty, for dead," the second said. "And he will make sure you're never found. And you shall be forever lost at sea." "Does that mean you're not going to help us?" Isaac demanded. "You think the Master of the Swans can't?" the first one said. "Too much nonsense may take you back home safely," the second said. "But since you don't want any more nonsense, then we shall never bother you again. We will take the Princess Kitty with us and be on our way." "Oh, Kitty! Kitty!" the crew of the Maybelle began to scream. "Make him don't leave us! We will allow too much nonsense! Make him change his mind, for pity's sake! We just want to get home!" Princess Kitty walked up before the Master of the Swans. He hands her a strand of rope with rails tied to the end and a hammer. Then he makes his way inside the mess. She connects one end of the rope to the bow and nails it with a hammer. Seeing the great waterfowl turn around and spread her enormous wings, Princess Kitty leaps out of the bow and onto the rear of the Swan, where she attaches the other end of the rope before leaping back under the ship.
"I bet more and more Harbor would like to see this,"
she said.
"But I wouldn't be too sure."
"You sent that Swan to save us, didn't you?" Fred asked.
"Prepare to be disappointed, because I didn't summon her."
"If you didn't, who did?" Giff said.
"The world is so unpredictable," she said. "Things happen suddenly, unexpectedly. We want to feel we are in control of our own existence. In some ways we are, in some ways we're not. We are ruled by the forces of chance and coincidence, the mysteries we're not supposed to solve, no matter how hard you ever try. As for me, I spent some time across the waves. I learned a lot of things I never could. Does that answer your question, if at all?"
And now, wonder of wonders. The Swan began to tow the Maybelle forward and away. The crew cheered, rushing about the deck, knowing that they are finally going home to the city by the sea. "The Master of the Swans shall join you men," the first Swan said. "He shall leave once we arrived at your city," the second said. Then they fly off into the sky, their bodies blending into the night.
"The Master of the Swans wants you to come join him inside the mess," Princess Kitty said. "Celebrate with him if you like. If you wish to retire, you have my consent."
A majority of the crew wanted to sleep below, while she, Fred, Giff, Hector, Isaac, Larry, Irving, and Kozlov head inside the mess. They were surprised to see the Master of the Swans bring forth a late banquet, comprised of lobsters, some bottles of wine, herring, roast beef, and breadsticks, served with a bowl of melted butter on the table. "I tell you, for a person who doesn't talk much, you sure had good taste," Fred smirked. The Master of the Swans gave the men a glance, before turning away, allowing them to sit at the table and eat. When Cyril came into the room and see the food at the table, he desperately asked, "Do you think there's enough good food for Bugsy, Fred?" "You mean he hasn't eaten yet?" Fred asked. Cyril quickly shook his head, saying, "None, Fred. He hasn't eaten in 2 days. He only drinks a little." Then the tears came. "I tried my best to make him feel better. I did what I had to do, but I fear that he's just getting worse and worse." "Kitty knows that he's not going to die. She said so herself. We're already heading home because of her. You have to trust her. We all did." "Not me!" Cyril wailed. "I refused after what she did to Bugsy."
"This will be the last time you or anyone else mistrust me," she stated.
She refused to have her anger resurfaced. Instead, she turns to the Master of the Swans.
"Would you see that Bugsy has something to eat? You'll find him in the specialist office behind the funnel. If he refuses, Make him eat. Have Cyril accompany you. He might have to use restraints on him.
Cyril's eyes widened at the words she said. Already the Master of the Swans dragged him out and closed the door. She turns to the crew and ordered,
Stay seated, men. While you are in bed, dream of home. You'll be heading there soon.
Dawn had arrived, Thursday morning, and Fred could see the city of Kodono, most importantly, Morimo Harbor. Princess Kitty stood at the railing, gazing at the giant swan that's taking her home. But on shore, it turns out that the harbor was concerned about the Maybelle being lost at sea, when the CGKS received her incomplete call of distress. Later, when the giant swan approaches the harbor with the Maybelle in tow, Fred looked out. Over 3,000 people lined the entire harbor. The magnesium flashes of the photographers from the Kodono Times went off like small bombs, lighting an amazing tableau. Several officers kept the mob back. The harbor was also packed with friends and relatives, officials and the press, even from the Kodono Times. A few ambulances were also present for those who were injured or suffered. Fred then realized that all the people on that harbor didn't see the swan. They remained oblivious. He turns to the mess and finds the Master of the Swans leaving. "Hey, mister," he said. "They didn't see a swan. Why are they unable to see it?" But the Master of the Swans shoved him out of his way and walks out of the ship down the gangway that has been connected to the ship by the police from several divisions. He brushed past them. Fred heads inside the mess where the crew are taking refuge, especially Princess Kitty. "We've made it home, but we have a problem," he said. "What do we got now?" Isaac asked. The crew heads out on deck and saw the swan docking the ship to the harbor. But the people on the harbor were unaware of the creature's presence. "They didn't see the swan in front of them?" Giff asked. "I asked the old man," Fred said, "but he went off without answering. Some help he is. I'll have to ask Kitty then." He heads inside to look for her. He looked everywhere, even Giff's cabin, but she was nowhere to be seen. Only her clothes from her disguise, folded neatly, can be found on the bed. It turns out that by the time the Maybelle docks, like the time with the soldiers upon her arrival to Bomveria with the Pratchett's, she vanished, because the people outside hardly believe in anything, even the giant swan. "Did you find her?" Giff asked when he enters his cabin. "She left us without saying goodbye, too," Fred frowned. "I just found her clothes." "Well, we'll just have to see if any of us stumbled into her path again. As for me, I'll be staying in Kodono with my family. No more fishing trips for me, Fred. I figure I beat the odds this time. I'm not going to be testing fate again." "You quit the fishing business, and you won't get paid." "I'll go make my own money in a different job. Probably to pay for a new Steinway and a new blazer for the fall semester." "Is it because of Kitty? Is it her that makes you behave this way? Does she talk you into this?" "Sometimes she just come and go as she pleases. She never talked me into quitting. It's just that it's my decision. Maybe she's not meant to be seen by the press, and I think other fishermen would quit too." "Well, if you're quitting, then take Kitty's share. That'll be enough to pay for that piano of yours. If you want to leave my vessel, you have my consent to go." Maybe I should rethink my life and accept that everything Kitty does is unpredictable. Maybe that's the idea for her. Just then, Isaac burst through the cabin. "Fred," he said, "there's someone who have entered the mess who'd like to have a word with you." "Reporters?" Fred asked. "I don't think anyone has come aboard yet." "I don't think so." "Then who?" "You go, Fred," Giff said. "I'll pack up my things, including putting Aloysius in his carrier, and get going to the dock. My parents should have arrived at the harbor by now." Nodding, Fred follows Isaac to the mess. Sure enough, someone was waiting for them in there. It was an elegantly beautiful woman of an indeterminate age, with well-groomed blonde hair, dressed in a black suit and bowler, the blue eyes filled with determination. Joining her was a handsome, black-haired man with a matching mustache and goatee, dressed in gray. His wing-tipped shoes stepped onto the wooden floor as he walked inside. "Who are you?" Fred demanded. "Who gave you permission to come here?" The woman calmly said, "I can assure you, I don't need permission." He was immediately taken aback by the sudden attitude. She takes out her card and gives it to him. "Charlotte Simone Lenoir, expert in mythology and folklore," she introduced. "Joining me is exotic collaborator Furukawa Ryutaro. Care to tell us what happened to you and your men, including your rusted, washed-up hulk of a ship?" He said bitterly. "We got lost during a storm, with no sign of help. Not even a search party has been sighted." She raised both her eyebrows. "I find it unfortunate. Now here you are at the harbor, waiting to be questioned. Care to explain how you came back here?" "We are this cat girl named Princess Kitty," Isaac stated. 8 days ago, we were on this fishing expedition. On Sunday, however, we happened to encounter a swarm of terrible fish after Fred happens to catch one earlier. The ship sank, but this kitty raised it back up and saved us, but not without suffering a terrible loss. Half of us lost their lives." Fred nodded and gives her a daguerreotype that belongs to Otis. "When you leave, make sure you give this to the wife and child of Otis McGinty. Give them my respects," he said. "He was a great sailor." But she placed it onto the table. In a quiet fury, Ryutaro said, "But you didn't explain to her how you got back here." "Last night, there was a giant swan who took us back home," Fred said. "The crew thought Kitty was the one who summoned it at first." "And where is this Princess Kitty?" she asked. "Well, you're too late. She left without saying goodbye, including that old man in an old-fashioned captain's outfit. And if you're really an expert in this stuff, I'm certain you believe that there's a giant swan in front of our ship, and we didn't make it up." She crossed her arms, glaring. "But won't the press believe you? What is everyone going to hear?" "Did you or did you not believe us?" Fred shouted. "You have any idea who you're talking to?" Ryotaro demanded. "Don't forget that you're talking to Charlotte Lenoir, an expert in mythology and folklore, though she does have a questionable reputation. She really isn't too sociable. She's very good at what she does to learn information. Very vital information. Guess that means she's unlike any woman I've ever met in Morimo, or anywhere," Fred stated. "Let's put it this way," she said. "I knew that mythology and folklore had in recent years taken on an unheralded relevance to the modern world. The modern world, of course, was changing fast, but not even that fades folklore into obscurity. Once in a while, things happen to people that can make them rational in a formulaic way. Some people want to know if that is ever possible. I am one of those people. Of course, one must be very foolish enough to believe such things. When the world do find out about something unusual happening, all it does is to affect the lives of those around us, our beliefs, our notions of what's real in the world, everything. Nothing will ever be the same again. And right now, you and your crew do make a good example." "Why are you here, then, before any of the press and the photographers come aboard?" "Chances are, reporters might think you were just making things up. I'll say it again. What is everyone going to hear?" Before he can say anything, she leaves the mess. "What can I say?" Ryotaro asked. "That's just one of the few things you could expect from somebody like Miss Lenoir. She did mean every word." He leaves the mess and slams the door. "Well, to hell with her," Fred stated. "Self-proclaimed expert. What a joke. They got to believe us. Surely we'll tell them everything that has happened." Giff bursts into the room, panicking. "What are you doing?" Fred asked. "Shouldn't you be—" "I have to find Aloysius," Giff said. "What do you mean?" Isaac asked. "Shouldn't he be—" "I already checked my cabin. He's not here." "You really know how to take care of pets, don't you?" Larry stated. "Leave him alone," Fred said. He turned to Gif. What do you mean he's not in your cabin? I don't know, Gif said. Earlier, I saw him in my cabin before we head to shore. Now he's gone like that. You mean he may be anywhere on this boat? Ector asked. I don't know that yet. I wasn't there with him. It wasn't my fault. Go out on deck, and I'll have someone look for your pet, Fred said. I'm not leaving this ship without my cat, Gif said. And you won't. It's really the best I can do for you, while we explain everything that has happened to the press. He's my responsibility, Fred. You better find my cat. However, there is only one thing left for Fred to do. He heads back on deck and said to the officers, Men, you will now let all medical personnel board the ship first, for most of the survivors who really needed medical attention. The press will come next, followed by the photographers, then the loved ones, friends and relatives. I need 2 of you to guard the forecastle while the loved ones come up on deck. Those who try to gain access there, you will calmly refuse them access and turn them away. You will then have the bodies be transferred to an available CGKS vessel, and the coroners to prepare them for a proper burial at sea. The loved ones will attend the funeral to mourn for the loss of life. Unfortunately, it doesn't go well. That's exactly what Miss Lenoir meant when she asked, What is everyone going to hear? No matter how much facts the crew has shared to the press, no one in Moymoor Harbor ever believed them. Gifford Rogers will search the ship in vain for his bicolor cat, Aloysius. It turns out, after Princess Kitty was gone, Aloysius leaves the ship by turning the door handle with his weight, before slipping through an opening of the door and out of the ship, away from the people on the harbor. He makes sure he's careful when someone steps on his tail by accident. Several loved ones were reunited with survivors. Gif's parents, Alan and Carol, greeted their son with unabashed joy, but they were upset with the disappearance of Aloysius and the loss of his Steinway. However, not all reunions work out so well. Less than 17 of them were hundreds of relatives. When the ship docked at the harbor and saw only 18 survived, the truth sank in. A morose silence fell. Then it was broken by heart-wrenching sobs, as the women who were now widows accepted the terrible truth. Some of the children wailed, painfully aware that they'll never see their fathers again. Try as the grieving people may, they are unable to gain access to the forecastle, where the dead lay from the officers. Among the loved ones was Florence Curtis, Bugsy's wife. She was immediately led to her husband inside the specialist's office by Fred Groden. She was actually white-faced to see her husband white-haired and still in a state of catatonia. He has to be in a wheelchair for 4 weeks, or until he fully recovers. It seemed Princess Kitty's Batsu stare did an immense number. For some of the people, they believe that something supernatural from origins unknown has spared the crew and the entire boat from danger, calling it a miracle. And in the end, the crew of the Maybelle has become friends with Princess Kitty, now that they're finally home and safe with a greater appreciation of life itself. Even though their lives would never be the same again, life would begin anew. For the 17 who were lost, and their bodies transferred to the CGKS vessel Atropos, their friends and relatives would attend their proper burial at sea, where the disaster took place, according to Fred Groden, who was also attending. Sitting on top of one of the buildings in Moimo, Princess Kitty can see the Maybelle and the huge crowd from here. Perhaps if she does explain the crew about the strange things that have happened in the 8 days at sea, things that must be believed to be seen, especially herself. Her attention suddenly changed when she sees Aloysius strolling around. She landed in front of him and picked up the cat.
What are you doing here?
She asked.
You shouldn't be wandering around. You should be back with Gif. I can bet my whiskers that he's worried sick about you.
He already has, the cat said. You didn't even say goodbye to him. Her ears droop.
Do you know how many people are there at that dock? Too many, if you ask me. Like the giant swan, I was not meant to be seen by any grown-ups other than my friends. They do not believe in absolutely anything nowadays.
The cat frowned. They can't help but question the natural order of things when something unusual happens, don't they? What kind of ordinary city or any city continues to doubt such unusual things? I can't help but ask myself, will it be worth living?
No. No, it isn't. Everything depends on what I can do.
And does your destiny continue to define who you are? If so, then consider it the beginning of a new adventure.
There's one problem. I don't even know where to begin.
She puts down Aloysius. You know what they say, an opportunity is never hard to find, the cat said. Goodbye, kitty. I hope they welcome you. Then again, the city may not be considered ready for all that you can do. As she watched him go, it seems that her adventure on board the Maybelle has driven her to do the one thing that she is destined to do in the beginning, to do great things to the people in the city, to continue living and embrace forever the trait of her special heritage in her heart. She said to herself,
They will.
Then she went off, out of Moimo Harbor and into the midst of the city that she is destined to call home. People in the city of Kodono were completely oblivious to what great things she might do next to those around her. She can't wait to get started, although she always asks herself, where would she go from here? This concludes Volume 3, Princess Kitty's Adventure at Sea. The story of Princess Kitty of KAWAII Wonderland will continue in Volume 4, Princess Kitty's Adventure in Town. This work was written by Byron Kingsley and dramatized for audio by the author. This has been a Studio Kingsley production. Thank you for listening.